What are some specific things you want to do about the heroin crisis?
Yeah, you name it. I mean, what are the big three things we have to do? Prevention, treatment, enforcement. Since 2010, what have we seen? We've seen a great reduction in enforcement because they cut local government funds. So basically every town that you talk to almost, and a lot of the ones you guys cover, they're off 20-25% in their street strength. They have fewer firefighters that can respond to 911 calls. So we've gone the wrong way on enforcement. We've certainly, I mentioned the prevention side just as an example. We used to have 380 officers funded in schools. Now we're down to 220. The most important thing, maybe any decision that can be made, the most important one is the young person who decides not to start. Now, usually that's going to be family and personal responsibility, but there are ways we can help on the edges, and some are having officers in schools, other prevention programs. The Attorney General they have funded fewer officers, not more. And then on treatment, just this July, they cut a federal grant in a way that reduced funding across the state by 30% of that federal grant. So they're going the wrong way. So my plan is, frankly, to do more of those things, not less. And there's a lot of details. That's at tab 1 here. But we want to work with the legislature to get a lot more treatment out across the state, and to make sure that treatment is treatment that actually is treatment that the evidence shows works. And we need leadership to make sure that money is spent on things that the evidence shows works. It's not just the same old, same old. Do a lot more prevention. Be a lot smarter on enforcement. One thing I proposed almost a year ago, I was happy to see Mr. DeWine echo it just yesterday with that task force, was we got to be tracking data in real time to know where the problems are getting better, where they're getting worse, and what's working. I called for that last November. He got to work on it yesterday with that task force's meeting, a year too late. But we also have to be tougher on enforcement. And that's why I have called for the AG, and as AG, I will make sure we connect every time there's a dealer that we can connect back to an overdose death. We want to help every local prosecutor make sure they are holding that dealer accountable for the homicide, not for just the deal. We think there also needs to be an adjustment to the sentencing laws so that folks who are caught dealing heroin aren't guaranteed probation, which right now they are. The local judges can't actually provide any more of a sanction than that, and I think that gives too much of a green light to keep dealing without any accountability. We also think in every state that's done this and community has found to work, we need to be much more aggressive about getting Narcan distributed more broadly around our communities. The places that have it more broadly available are the places that are seeing overdose deaths start to plateau. A lot of other things in this plan, you'll see it's longer than I have time to go through every detail, but one other area where I'm interested in, some states are starting to take a close look at some of the practices that prescription drug companies used a few years ago in over-distributing and over-marketing prescription drugs that had no business being in certain people's hands. And those people got addicted, and now they're still addicted, and many of them are addicted to heroin. If those companies did that in a way that was false marketing, there's some accountability there, and people are addicted because of that problem. And some AGs, and I'm one of them, I'll want to look into this, are pursuing to make sure those companies are accountable, and the dollars come from those companies can actually pay to help deal with some of the treatment needs we now have. So there's a lot there. What I will not do is what's happened in Ohio in the last 3 years. The heroin crisis, sadly, was the most predictable crisis in a long time, because they went after the prescription drug problem, which they should have done. The pill mills, and I'm sure you got a lot of press conferences and big moments, but guess what? They didn't deal with the treatment side. What happens when you only deal with one part of a comprehensive problem is you do what Ohio's done for 3 years, played a big game of whack-a-mole. Over here, go after the prescription drugs, people flock to the heroin, and we've got the same problem. That's what happens when you don't have comprehensive leadership and you just sort of do a few things. For heroin, we need a comprehensive plan that deals with the enforcement side, but also is smart enough to do prevention and treatment at the same time. Right now, Ohio's, as I said, going in the wrong direction on all three of those issues. And the stuff right now that the current Attorney General doing, it is little here, little there. No, look at what was in the Columbus Dispatch today. Not to point to a competitor, but they quoted the Shelby County Sheriff, a Republican, saying there's no plan at all. These guys aren't helping in any way. The common speech from the Attorney General that communities just have to get mad about this issue and get mad. I don't know if he said that to you today. He says it everywhere. That's not going to solve anything. They're mad about it. They've been mad for 3 years. They need some help. They had their budgets cut when they needed more enforcement. they've had treatment cut when they needed more of it. So they're mad, everyone's upset, but that's not the solution. The solution is real answers, and that's what our plan will do.
Is the tracking process you're talking about, is that in place? Is that something that would be implemented quickly, or is that something you'd have to work on to get into place?
I wish it was in place. The reason it occurred to me it was needed is because if you look at when Mr. DeWine announced last year that there was a heroin crisis, it was alarming the way he announced it. He said, my office called a bunch of the coroners and we started asking them how many people had died, and after we got 40 phone calls back, we realized we had a problem. It's 2013. And that's how we're tracking data? And he used 2012 data to announce in November, I think October 2013, that we had a crisis. It's clear they are far from doing this. A year after I called for it, apparently yesterday's meeting, they're starting to talk about it. I don't think it should be that hard. I think we need to work with coroners to have a data system that they can populate in real time, overdose deaths and other indicators that will let us track the problem, track what's working. If a county's doing something really well, great. The data will show that to us, and then we can start to use that as a model in other places. But if you look back, and you probably covered it, Mike DeWine announced a heroin crisis in October of 2013. Again, years after, I'm sure you'd written about it, police and sheriffs had talked about it, and the way he determined the crisis happened made you think he was using 1980, calling coroners and asking them to call you back versus real-time data. Here's the one reason this is so important, and this comes from my experience at the local level. The communities that have fought crime most effectively the last 30 years, there's a lot of different things they've done, but one thing almost all of them have done in common is they've used real-time data. And this is what CompStat was so famous for in New York City. Giuliani did this. Real-time data tracking lets you move resources around instantly to solve problems. So to me, it's just eye-opening that a year ago he announced a crisis after making a bunch of phone calls. They clearly aren't tracking the data or gathering it. And a year later, he's just now saying they're going to get to work on it. This is one of the first things I'll do when I get there. But right now, they really haven't done anything.
I appreciate it. You guys correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe one of the questions we asked was, what role would the Attorney General's office have having a statewide task force, something to organize?
Right.
Share the data.
Right.
Statewide, because Guernsey County in my case, other ones. I'm not sure how much communication is going on about these different areas.
Yeah.
So
no.
What would your office?
I think so. I have a difference of opinion with Mr. DeWine in some of the basic philosophy of what this job should be doing. I am not trying to reinvent the wheel of local government. I don't think the Attorney General should just be doing redundant services of what local government already does. I think that's in a world of scarce resources a waste. He recently created a dive team. I don't think you need a separate dive team. I think a lot of local firefighters have dive teams. I wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. What I think, and this is to your question, I think the Attorney General should be playing a value-added role. And one of the value-addeds is what you're talking about. Where you do modern-day data collection analysis that local departments may not have the capacity to do, or aren't even, it's beyond their job description to think about some of these issues in a global sense. But the Attorney General, using modern technology, modern thinking, modern management, modern analysis, can actually pull together data from across the state that could be invaluable to all the locals who are trying to solve the problem. And I mentioned this as an example. If you don't track data in real time, you actually never know what's working. It'd be like having you're selling products, but you don't keep track of your sales, so you can't tell which products are selling better. Well, that's what's happening here. So what I'd love to have is a system where not only could I tell Guernsey County, hey, there's something going on in your region that's very troubling, or it's moving there, but also if we were doing it the right way, you might have a few counties, like Lucas County is doing some innovative things. By the way, if Mr. DeWine talked about that, it's not because there's an AG pilot program there. It's because Lucas County is doing interesting things, and he decided about a month ago to give them some money. But they started it more than a year ago. But the reason the tracking is so important, they're doing interesting things. But what would be really important is to see if the data over the next 6 months reflects that it's having an outcome that actually shows it's working. And then you go to Guernsey County and any other Defiance and others and say, hey, we're doing this data tracking all over the country, all over the state. Lucas County is doing the kind of things that they're doing that are innovative, and guess what? Overdose deaths are going down. So we actually use that data to inform decisions and be able to then spread the word with other communities about what's actually working. That's why this is so important, and that's why, frankly, it's in the 21st century, in 2013, and even today, after a year after I called about it, the idea that the Attorney General's office still isn't doing this is amazing to me. And this is why I say the current Attorney General, for all he's done in public service over the years, it is way outmatched by this crisis. He's not even close. He announced a crisis last October. That was 3 years too late. He's had, probably in a lot of your communities, town hall meeting after town hall meeting that have accomplished, as far as I can tell, absolutely nothing. Nothing came of them. And now he announces a task force that started meeting yesterday that seems completely disconnected from those town hall meetings. I mean, I literally think we're just sort of randomly going around talking. There's no plan, there's no strategy, and it's getting worse and not better, while the state is making decisions that are actually pulling back on the things we need to solve it. So this crisis, I mean, we can keep doing what we're doing, which is a whole lot of nothing. 3 people doing prevention, I mean, that's just not serious. 3 people couldn't do prevention in 1 county, let alone a whole state. It's just not serious. And we need to have, I think, and that's why if you read through my plan, you'll see it's serious, it's comprehensive, it involves working with a lot of other people to get it done.